Today we are talking about fog machines. I love fog machines. I have always loved fog machines. I actually got paid with a fog machine for the first trade show that I ever worked. I was probably 12 or 13, and in talking with the client on the phone, I would love to have been a fly on the wall, but basically it came up that I was interested in adding one to my collection. And at the time, I think the fog machine that I wanted was like $250, some absurd amount of money for the age that I was. And the client actually said, how about we pay you $250 in advance so you can buy the fog machine and bring it to the show. And then, of course, you keep it afterwards. That was my payment. So that all happened except for the fact that the venue was not okay with a teenager bringing a fog machine to the trade show. Can't imagine why. But I did the gig, I got to keep the fogger, and I've been collecting them ever since. These are two of my go-tos, and I just wanted to give you a couple of overviews about why I love them in general, but also why I like these particular ones. Basically, the way a fog machine works is there's a fluid tank over here, and then there's a pump inside the back of the fog machine, and there's a heat exchanger sort of in the middle of it. And when the pump turns on, it pulls liquid from the tank and it pushes it into a heat exchanger, which is super hot and has a very small nozzle on the end here. And essentially it vaporizes the liquid instantly. And because it expands rapidly, that is what pushes it out the front. So there's really only one motor and there's one heating element. It's a pretty simple device typically. At its basic, that's how it works, but then it's all about how do you control it. So the easiest thing is just a remote control, a wired remote like this, where you can just push the button. That's the ones you'll see at Target around Halloween. This one has a timer with it, and so on the timer I can adjust the interval, the duration, and this also allows for adjusting the output. The output basically is how fast the motor, the pump, is going to be pumping the liquid into the heater. They also have wireless adapters for it, so this can plug into the back here, and I've got a little fob here that I can push the button on. And then also with this guy, I can control it with DMX. DMX back here is the lighting, theatrical lighting protocol. So if I want to tie this into a system that's controlling lights and other elements, then you can use DMX control as well. One of the challenges early on with fog machines, at least sort of the prosumer levels like this, was the heating element would have to rest every now and then. So basically, the heating element would be ready to fog, and then it would fog for a while, and then it would turn off because the heater had actually cooled down too much. So the fog stopped, and the heater had to reheat. Inevitably, there were so many times where, the timing of that was just awful, where I would be backstage and you push the button, a little bit comes out and then it dies. So in the early days, the way I would work around that was make sure that we plugged it in at a very specific time before whatever effect needed to happen. And that way we were sure that it would basically, we wanted to give about 10 minutes where it started stone cold and it got up to the temperature, but then it didn't have a chance to sort of cool off from there and get it before we get into another cycle. Now, the good news, a lot of these, including these two, have dual heat units. And that means that in this case, this is a 1600, so there were two 800-watt heating elements in here, and they sort of take turns. So this one can run continuously without ever completely turning off on you. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy both of these models in particular, is that it is always ready to go. One other note about fog machines is that technically they're not fog, it's really more steam or smoke. And in order to create that fog sort of ground hugging effect, you need something called a fog chiller. And I've built many of these over the years. Basically, it's a way of taking the output from here and chilling it to below air temperature. And so that's actually a tall order because what comes out of here is super hot, right? It's steaming. And so, however, a lot of times you use dry ice or just a lot of regular ice in a lot of tubing. And that's the typical way of doing that is the output of this goes into a tube, which you snake through a bunch of ice. And then by the time it comes out, now it is cooler than the ambient air temperature, which means it sinks to the ground. This really only works if it is not windy. So if an indoor environment, it looks pretty cool, but outdoors, if there's the slightest breeze, it sort of ruins that effect. But if you're trying to make a fog that hangs low to the ground, you can check out other videos on fog chillers, and you'll see how to use something like this and be able to use it to stick to the ground. One quick honorable mention in the fog machine category is actually this guy. These are cans of air, and I've used these for effects in the past where if you hold it sideways and give the nozzle a squeeze, you get this nice blast of steam sort of an effect. The downside is, of course, this will eventually get used up and you have to replace it. The other challenge is how to control this. If you've got an actor operating it or a technician, it's super easy. But if you're trying to do something remote and mechanical, it's not quite as easy as one of these guys in terms of push of a button. But it also does that great steam effect without a lot of space. And so if you just want something real fast to make this effect, then grab yourself a can of air.